Okay, by now we've been collecting some ideas about how to learn from our informant and using our tape player and walking around talking to people. And we're going to focus a little more specifically on practicing. And by review, I would note that you've already learned a couple of drills, and we've talked about working with our informants, and we've talked about the language learning cycle. And you want to get that cycle set up and operating as soon as possible when you get into your new culture. Now, when it comes to practicing, you want to think in terms of 3 different stages. And each stage is important because they give you if you pay attention to each one, you learn the language the way that they speak it, as opposed to bringing in a lot of accent from the previous language that you've spoken. So those 3 stages are to listen, to mimic, and then produce. Listen, mimic, and produce. Now these stages can be used, I should say, with an informant, or you can use them with the tape. You can listen, you can mimic, and you can produce with either one. And in fact, you're going to be doing the practice with both because each have their advantages. Obviously, when you practice with an informant, you have the advantage of a live person, and they're listening and correcting as you go along. Now, unfortunately, that live person also gets bored if you just do this for hours on end. And so the tape is a much better tutor over a long period of practice, because it just doesn't get tired like you will. But when we practice with the informant, again, we're going to look at these 3 stages. We want to listen to them using the language. You're going to be tempted when they say it to immediately jump in there and start talking. And that's a good thing, but you do want to give it some time to kind of sink in and to listen to what's happening. A lot of times, the reason why we don't produce language correctly is because our ears have not been trained to pick up sounds that are present in their language that are not in our own home language, our heart language. That's really true, particularly of some of the Asian accents that have tones in them. So listening very closely is important. Now, when we mimic them, we want to make sure that we give them every opportunity to say, no, 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 it's not like that, it's like this. And we want to solicit from them as much input as possible. And if you go on, you can go onto YouTube and you can Google, put in the phrase Afghan language learner, and you will see an Afghan gentleman that's trying to mimic. And it's an excellent example of somebody learning language just by repetition and being corrected. And over and over and over, you're going to want to go through this mimic phase. And then finally, you're going to produce that language, beginning with a little prompting, but obviously when you're out there practicing on live people in the real world, you're not going to get any prompting. So you're going to move from prompts to no prompts fairly quickly. So when you listen, have the informant state the text to you. Now the next little bit of advice is really important. You're going to have it written down probably at this point, but don't follow along with the paper when they're saying it. Now right there, I know I lost people because they're thinking to themselves, well, I'm a visual learner. Well, hey, when you're out there talking in the marketplace, you're not going to be looking at the text. So you might as well get used to using language as it's really used. And here, repetition is your friend. Listen over and over. I don't know how many times is going to be necessary on a piece of text. It's going to be different for each person. But I would say at a minimum, 10, 12, 15, 20 times. Just listen. Let your informant say it to you. Now, when you get into the mimicking stage, your informant states the text. You state the text. They correct you. They point out problems. And you just do this over and over. And again, never look at the written text as you're going through the mimicking process, okay? Don't worry about getting it right on paper. You want to get it right as you state it, not as you read it. Here's a little drill you can use with an informant called a build-up mimicry drill. So only do this after you've listened a bunch of times. So take the sentence and break it down. And believe it or not, it's best to start with the end of the sentence, not the beginning. Now avoid, again, looking at what's written down. Now that said, I am going to, now in the production or the producing of the text, the last phase, you say the whole thing. Now, I'm using just short sentences here, but when you do real language, you're probably going to be looking at 5 or 6 sentences strung together. The production on that length of text gets difficult. So, particularly in the beginning stages when you don't have a lot of the filler words figured out yet, you're going to want to have some smaller pieces of text so that you're able to produce the whole thing. So, you state the entire phrase or set of phrases to your informant. Again, they're going to correct you, and you're going to repeat it until you can say the whole thing kind of picture perfect without any pauses or errors in it. Now let's flip our idea of the mimicry drill we just talked about, and instead we'll talk about sentence completion practice with an informant. So now your informant starts with just a sentence, or starts the sentence with just a word or two. And that's your trigger to say the whole rest of the sentence. And then after you say it, this is really important, they say it back to you and you listen to them. Then you go on to the next sentence. And so they're triggering you with just one word. So in the example that I showed you, your informant would say, ja, and then you would say the whole thing. Ja se zovem Ted. And you work your way from the beginning to the end. Now, it sounds really easy to do when you're working with one sentence, but what happens when you get 50 or 60 sentences in your repertoire? You may be able to hand to your informant a stack of index cards with all of your pieces of text on it, and they will go through that and they will shuffle it, and then they'll say one word, and then it's your job to give back the whole piece of text. And it's really helpful when you work with an informant for them to mix that text up so that you're not just learning things in order, but can pull those sentences out on a word-by-word basis. Now, you're working with your informant. We've already got 4 different drills that are recordable drills. Now, I shared with you a couple today that are ones that you do with an informant, but these are the ones that you can use to record that we've given so far. So, whole text listening, sentence mimicry, part A, part B, and the build-up mimicry drill. I'm going to give you another one that you can use for recording, and this is obviously focused on the production phase, sentence production drill. It's similar to a mimicry drill, only this time you state the sentence in the pause before your informant says it. So if you remember our format here, it's the name, the directions, and then the drill itself. So this is a sample of how this might be utilized. You will start your tape recorder and you say, sentence production drill. State the phrase in the pause, listening after you say it. Now the very first sentence you may want to give a little bit of a trigger to. So in my case, I might say, ja. Ja se zovem Ted. Okay, so that was it. I said the trigger, then I left a little pause. In that pause, later on, you're going to actually say the sentence, and then it's read back to you. Then it goes on to the very next sentence, and so on, and it works its way through the text. Okay, here's yet one more interesting drill you can use. This is called the simultaneous production drill. And you've actually potentially already recorded this drill because we're going to take the whole text listening drill and we're just going to use it to simultaneously say the phrase along with the tape. So now you are producing the text and not just listening to it, but you can use the exact same recording that you used before. Looks a little funny maybe when you're walking down the street just saying that whole text to yourself with your headphones in, but it's the production that you're really after. Okay, quick review for you. Now we've got lots of drills to choose from. Whole text listening drill, sentence mimicry drill, part A and part B. Build-up mimicry drill, sentence production drill, and simultaneous production drill. You're going to use your informant time and use the tape to practice. And after you get that phrase down, you're going to go and you're going to use that language with 30 to 50 people every day.